France, 1789. The storming of the Bastille, the prison fortress in Paris on the 14th of July 1789, is one of the enduring images of revolution, a telling picture of a people's uprising that toppled one of the world's most powerful and repressive monarchies. With idealism and violence at its heart, the French Revolution, even more than the America's War of Independence, became a template for understanding future revolutions. A bankrupt monarchy. In 1774, the youthful Louis XVI came to the throne ill-equipped for the task. Although conscientious and well-intentioned, he failed to grasp the problems facing the monarchy and French society. His Austrian queen, Marie Antoinette, presided over court nobility, whose lavish lives were gossiped about and criticised by the excluded and oppressed masses. The Queen's excesses were widely blamed for France's debts. The cost of aiding American independence in 1783 and France's subsequent rearmament only increased the monarchy's financial woes. Unlike the British government, the French king had no effective way of raising revenue from the lucrative sources in France. His ancestors had agreed to relieve both the land nobility and the Catholic Church of direct taxation in return for their loyalty and acceptance of royal absolute power. Direct taxes fell upon the poorest, who had to pay the onerous poll tax. By the late 1780s, tax revenue hardly covered the interest on royal debts.
Hear me! Shall we continue to build palace after palace for the rich? Or shall we aspire to a more noble purpose and build decent housing for the poor? How does the Senate vote?
Fuck the poor!
Good.
A constitutional challenge. Bankruptcy drove Louis XVI and his advisors to acknowledge that the king alone could not solve France's problems. For the first time since 1614, the king summoned representatives of his subjects to an Estates Generale, a gathering of the clergy, nobility and common people, called the Third Estate, in May 1789. He expected that all would dutifully agree to new taxes and the reduction of elite privileges. However, the representatives of the Third Estate, joined by progressive nobles and a few clerics, challenged the whole way France had been governed for 2 centuries.
I am Frau
When the king refused to listen to radical demands that the 3 estates sit together as one house in which the Third Estate would predominate, and ordered the dissolution of the estates in June 1789, the representatives openly defied him and declared themselves the National Assembly, representing all the people of France. This constitutional challenge was compounded by the social upheaval gathering momentum across France. The 1780s had seen the French population boom, while bad weather and old-fashioned agricultural practices contributed to food shortages and inflation, threatening the survival of millions of the poor.
Oh, Your Majesty.
How's it going, Marie? It's good to be the king.
Dramatic reforms. The standoff between the king and the National Assembly climaxed with the events of 14th of July. Rumours that the king was going to dissolve the assembly and repudiate his debts, and public outrage at the alleged hoarding of food by royal officials who profited from reselling the food at high prices, incited revolt on the streets of Paris. Instead of suppressing the crowds, royal troops joined them. In revolts around France, soldiers refused to defend the authorities. Louis XVI at last capitulated to the National Assembly's demands, and dramatic reforms abolished the centuries-old class distinctions between nobles and common people. At the end of August 1789, the Declaration of the Rights of Man proclaimed men are born free and equal in their rights, and repudiated traditional theories of the divine right of kings to rule by declaring the fundamental source of all sovereignty resides in the nation. In the future, the citizens of France would decide on the laws that governed them. The Declaration of the Rights of Man summed up the enlightened thinking of the 18th century, with its criticism of hereditary distinctions and divine sanctions for them. The privileges of kings, nobles, and bishops were supposed to be replaced by equality before the law and equal rights. The revolutionary slogan, liberty, equality, fraternity, seemed about to be put into practice, but the pressures that sparked the revolution were hardly exhausted. Violence sweeps France. Although Parisians had been key in toppling the central government machinery and forcing Louis XVI to make concession after concession, France was of course still a largely rural society. Across the provinces, peasants revolted against their feudal lords. This widespread disorder shattered the old regime and pushed the members of the National Assembly, many of them from the old privileged classes, to try to calm the situation on the 4th of August 1789 by proclaiming the destruction in its entirety of the feudal regime. However, peasants who had anticipated freedom from all the dues and restrictions imposed upon them by the nobility were angered to learn that the National Assembly expected them to pay for the privilege of abolishing many of these feudal rights. This disappointment radicalized many in the countryside and weakened what remained of royal authority. Peasants ransacked their lords' country manors, destroying records of rents and feudal obligations. Abiding resentment of old privileges, fears about the food supply, and suspicions about the king's sincerity in accepting the revolution meant that the legal reforms passed by the National Assembly did not calm the popular mood, especially in Paris.
It's good to be the king.
In October 1789, Louis XVI faced further humiliation when a great crowd led by poor women marched to Versailles and forced the royal family to come back with them to Paris as prisoners. Lafayette, commander of the new National Guard formed to protect the revolution from backlash, saved the king from violence. But the influence of moderates like Lafayette, who looked to the American political model, was waning as more radical forces emerged with the collapse of royal power. A republic is born. Louis XVI's brothers and many nobles fled abroad looking for help from fellow monarchs. Fear of these émigrés, combined with continuing economic hardships, pushed the revolution into a cycle of growing violence. Louis XVI's attempt to flee France in June 1791 confirmed radicals in their distrust of him.
It's good to be the king.
The invasion of France in 1792 by Prussian and Austrian troops determined to restore Louis XVI's full power condemned the monarchy and the royal family. Unintimidated by the invaders, Parisians stormed Louis XVI's palace of the Tuileries, massacred the king's remaining guards and servants, and took the royal family prisoner. a republic was proclaimed. To symbolise a complete break with the past, a new calendar was adopted to replace the old Christian one. The names of days and months were changed, and a 10-day week was introduced along with the decimal system. The Republicans regarded the Catholic Church as a bastion of the old order, and by 1794 were trying to suppress it. Titles were abolished and everyone became simply citizen. An age of mass warfare. The new republic was born in savage circumstances in September 1792, when royalist suspects were massacred as the Prussian army approached Paris. Foreign invasion provoked a wave of nationalism. Against the professional Prussian troops, the new republic summoned a levée en masse in which all Frenchmen could be conscripted to defend the revolution. Led by a corps of ex-royal officers and inspired by revolutionary idealism, this new mass army swept away the Prussians, using daring new tactics on the battlefield. Instead of wars between professional mercenary armies, the French launched an age of mass warfare. As the new regime battled with foreign enemies and economic upheaval, tensions swelled in Paris, fueling fears of sabotage from sympathisers with the monarchy. The terror reached a feverish pitch and the ex-king fell as its first victim. The radical Republicans intended the trial and execution of Louis XVI as a decisive break with the past. It was also a reversal of their abolition of the death penalty, once a symbol of the old regime's cruelty.
Despoil me! Humiliate me! Only do it! Do it! Hump! Hump! Hump!
It's good to be the king.
Counter-revolutionary backlash. The Republicans thought that with the ex-king dead, counter-revolution would collapse, but criticism of the new regime persisted. In the countryside, especially in the south and west, open rebellion stirred. Many ordinary people resented the burdens of conscription, war taxation, and the anti-religious trend of the Parisian revolutionaries. Rural opposition to the rebellion, combined with rumours of counter-revolutionary plotters in league with the émigrés abroad, fueled a savage determination to stamp out opposition. The mass panic grew worse as civil war compounded problems like food shortages. Rather than quelling the counter-revolution, the show trial of citizen Louis Capet to give the king his family name in January 1793, and the trial and execution of his widow Marie Antoinette acted as a stepping stone to a wider reign of terror and paranoia. Soon the persecution of real and imagined enemies of the revolution spread like wildfire. The Reign of Terror. In a reign that came to be known as the Terror, institutions such as the Committee of Public Safety established a ruthless and arbitrary regime. It was justified by an appeal to a simple us versus them mentality. Robespierre insisted that the people are the sole sovereign in May 1793, dividing the population of France into the people and its enemies. Revolutionary laws provided no rights to those suspected of opposing the people. Tribunals regarded lack of enthusiasm for the revolution as proof of guilt, so almost anyone who hadn't taken part in demonstrations of support for the new authorities could face trial. Ordinary citizens settled scores by informing on neighbours for being aristocrats, a term which now came to mean anyone suspected of opposing the revolution. A revolutionary tribunal was established to provide summary justice. In June 1794, it was proclaimed that the penalty for all offences within the jurisdiction of the revolutionary tribunal is death. About 30,000 French people were denounced as enemies of the people and guillotined between the years of 1793 to 1794. Most were ordinary people who fell foul of informers in the atmosphere of suspicion generated by foreign invasion, food shortages, and rumours of plots. The terror was supposed to intimidate reactionaries into obedience, but in practice it terrorized supporters of the Republic as well. The revolution was devouring itself. The very radicalization of the terror was undermining Robespierre and his colleagues. Revolutionaries feared for their own safety, and Parisian crowds, demoralized by hyperinflation and shortages, no longer followed where the radicals led. A group within the Republican regime decided to forestall any charges against them by staging a preemptive coup against Robespierre at the end of July 1794. Along with his brother and other key terrorists, Robespierre was hustled on the 10th day of the month known as Thermidor to the guillotine. Thermidor came to symbolize the moment in revolutions when the radicals are toppled by their more moderate comrades and the drive for revolutionary perfection is tempered by pragmatic politics.
Your Majesty.
It's good to be the king.
The émigrés' hopes that Robespierre's fall would produce a reaction in favour of monarchy were soon dashed. The Republic stabilised under the rule of a five-man directory from 1795. Although the exiled royalists hoped that the bloodletting of Thermidor 1794 was a prelude to a restoration of the monarchy, France's new rulers proved determined to maintain the Republic. They took harsh measures against counter-revolutionaries and continued the war abroad. The rise in nationalism. The French Declaration of the Rights of Man was seen as subversive and threatening by monarchs across Europe and provoked foreign intervention in 1792. After repelling the invaders, the French troops swarmed eastwards across the Rhine, spreading revolutionary ideas and abolishing the feudal regime as they advanced. New republics sprang up in the Netherlands and Switzerland and as far south as Naples, in imitation of France. But for all the French rhetoric about the rights of man and universal brotherhood, the war promoted a new and surprising reactionary phenomenon: nationalism. At first, French nationalism was defensive and sprang up while the country resisted invasion, but with victory came an ugly turn. France's military success was taken as proof of French superiority, and over the next 20 years, French conquests provoked nationalist uprisings in Spain and Germany and helped to feed the spread of mutually exclusive and hostile nationalisms across Europe throughout the 19th century. War promoted the political influence of successful generals. None knew better how to turn military glory into political power than the 30-year-old Corsican Napoleon Bonaparte. In November 1799, he staged the first coup d'etat, seizing control of France, which was wearied by years of warfare, inflation, and shortages. At first, most French people accepted the new authoritarian ruler who satisfied many reactionaries by declaring the revolution is ended after 10 years of upheaval, while also reassuring many radicals by refusing to reverse the revolution's many social and legal changes. It took the self-proclaimed emperor's complete military defeat in 1815 to restore the monarchy. Even so, when the new King Louis XVIII returned after Waterloo, he had to accept that the revolution of 14th July 1789 had changed the political landscape forever. Repeated upheavals in 1830, 1848 and 1871 proved that the ideals of 1789 and social turmoil in France were far from exhausted.
Holy shit!
Would you please welcome from Canada, Rush.
And watch the song into the air. But they're marching to Bastille Day. The guillotine acclaimed their bloody parade. Read the dungeons of the innocent. Well, the king must kneel to let this kingdom rise.